"I saved the alien princess," the queen declared. "Only a man like you can marry my daughter." The sky above my farm split open with a sound like the world tearing in half, and before I could even drop the tool in my hand, a burning shape was falling straight toward the cornfield behind my house. I am Daniel Hollis, and until that night I had never seen anything stranger than a storm knocking down a fence. I had no idea that the next few minutes would change my life forever. The object hit the ground with a force that shook the earth under my boots. Dust and smoke rose into the night sky, and a heat wave rolled across the field, strong enough to make my eyes water from where I stood. Most people would have run the other way. I did not think about running. I grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar from my truck and moved straight toward the wreck, because that is simply who I am. I have spent my whole life pulling people out of accidents, and my body reacts before my mind can talk me out of it. As I got closer, I saw that this was no ordinary crash. The metal was shaped in ways I had never seen, curved and smooth, with lines glowing a soft blue, even as smoke poured out of a long crack down the side. I could smell burning fuel, sharp and strange, nothing like gasoline. Every second near that smell was a second closer to an explosion, and I knew it. Inside the crack, trapped behind a broken section of the hull, was a shape that made me stop breathing for a moment. She was tall, with pale silver skin that seemed to catch the moonlight, and large golden eyes that locked onto mine the instant she saw me. She was not screaming or crying. She was simply staring, calm and alert, as if she were studying me, deciding what kind of danger I might be. I did not have time to be amazed. The fuel smell was growing stronger, and somewhere behind the twisted metal, a soft ticking sound had started, steady and mechanical, like a countdown. I shouted at her to hold on, even though I knew she could not understand a single word. I wedged the crowbar into the gap and pushed with everything I had. The metal groaned, resisted, then finally gave way just enough for me to reach in and pull at the straps holding her in place. Her wrist was wrapped around a small device that blinked with a soft light, and even trapped and injured, she kept a tight grip on it, refusing to let go. The straps were unfamiliar, made of some kind of woven material I had never touched before, but a strap is still a strap, and years of pulling people out of wrecked cars had taught me how to find the release point on almost anything. My fingers found it, pressed, and the restraint snapped open. I pulled her free just as the ticking sound behind us grew faster. I threw her arm over my shoulder and ran, half carrying her through the broken cornstalks, my lungs burning, my legs pushing harder than they ever had. Behind us, the wreck lit up the night with a flash of white light and a wave of heat that pushed me forward the last few steps, before I even heard the sound of the blast. We hit the ground together, and for a moment, everything was silent except for my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. When I turned to check on her, she was still holding tightly to my jacket with one hand, her golden eyes wide, studying my face as if trying to understand what kind of creature had just risked everything to save her. Within an hour, the quiet countryside around my farm was filled with strange lights descending from the sky, moving with a grace that no human aircraft could match. I expected soldiers, or perhaps government agents demanding explanations. Instead, out of the largest ship stepped a woman with silver hair, pulled back in a simple style, wearing a long dark coat that seemed to move on its own, even without wind. Her presence made the air around her feel heavier, as if the whole field understood that she was someone important. She walked straight past the soldiers gathering nearby and knelt beside the woman I had pulled from the wreck, speaking softly in a language full of soft clicks and gentle tones. Then she looked up at me, her golden eyes, so similar to the younger woman's, studying every inch of my mud-covered clothes and the blood running down my arm from a cut I had not even noticed until then. "You are the one who freed her," she said, her English surprisingly smooth, as if she had learned it in seconds rather than years. "Yes, ma'am," I answered, still catching my breath. There was a fire starting. I couldn't just stand there. She studied me a moment longer, then turned to look at the burning wreck in the distance. Every guard assigned to her protection carries years of training. They are taught to calculate risk before acting, to weigh every possible outcome before making a move. It is why she survived 1,000 dangers before tonight. She paused, and it is also why, when the ship began to fail, they hesitated instead of reaching her in time. You did not hesitate. There wasn't time to think, I said honestly. Only time to move. Something in her expression shifted, though I could not quite tell what it meant. I am Queen Miriam, of the Vareth line, she said. This is my daughter, Princess Visari. You saved not only her life tonight, but the future of our people, for she is the last heir of our royal bloodline. I did not know what to say to that, so I simply nodded, still holding the small cut on my arm. The days that followed were unlike anything I had ever known. Teams of engineers and healers from Visari's world arrived quietly, treating her injuries with technology that healed wounds faster than any hospital on Earth could manage. I was asked to stay nearby, first for questioning, then simply because Visari refused to let anyone else explain what had happened that night. She insisted, through a translator device attached to her collar, that I be the one to describe every second of the rescue, over and over, as if she wanted to relive the moment, from my point of view, rather than her own. I learned quickly that her people, the Vareth, had built a civilization far older than ours, one based on careful thought and endless calculation. Every decision among their leaders passed through layers of advisors, models, and predictions before any action was taken. It had kept their society stable for thousands of years, but it had also created a deep flaw, one that Queen Miriam admitted to me during a quiet evening on my porch, where she had come, strangely enough, without any guards. My daughter's protectors are among the finest in our fleet, she said, watching the sun set over my fields. They can predict the outcome of a battle before the first shot is fired. Yet on the night her ship was struck by debris, they spent nearly a full minute debating the safest way to approach the wreckage. A full minute, Daniel Hollis. By the time they decided, the fire had already spread beyond what their protocols expected. And I just happened to be nearby, I said. You did more than happen to be nearby, she replied. You acted without hesitation, without waiting for permission, without needing a plan approved by anyone else. Among my people, that instinct is rare. It is treasured. It is, in many ways, the missing piece in a society that has grown too careful to survive true danger. I did not fully understand the weight of her words until a few weeks later, when she called for a private meeting inside her ship, a place filled with soft lighting and quiet humming machines that seemed to breathe along with the walls. Visari sat beside her mother, dressed now in a simple robe instead of the armor she wore that first night, her golden eyes calm but focused entirely on me. Daniel, the Queen began, using my first name for the first time. I must speak to you plainly. Among my people, marriage is not a matter of feeling alone. It is a matter of survival, of balance, of choosing a partner whose strengths repair what the family may lack. My daughter is brilliant, patient, and wise beyond her years, but she was raised, like all our children, to think before she moves. I believe that instinct, if left unchecked in the next generation, could one day cost us everything. Visari watched her mother carefully, then turned her attention to me, waiting. You, however, the Queen continued, moved before you thought. You did not calculate the odds of survival, or the political weight of rescuing a princess from another world. You simply saw someone in danger and acted. I have watched you these past weeks, farmer, mechanic, rescuer of strangers you did not know existed a month ago, and I have come to believe that only a man like you can marry my daughter. The room went completely silent. Even the soft humming of the ship's machines seemed to pause. I looked at Visari, half expecting her to protest, to explain that her mother had misunderstood something, that this was simply a formality being taken too seriously. Instead, her expression was calm, thoughtful, the same look she had given me the night I pulled her from the wreckage, as if she had already been considering this outcome long before her mother spoke it aloud. I do not offer my hand easily, she said, her voice steady through the translator. Our laws allow me to refuse any match my mother proposes, even one from her own throne. I have refused 3 such proposals already, from men and women of noble blood across a dozen worlds. My chest tightened, unsure of what she meant to say next. But I do not refuse you, she finished. Not because you saved my life, though that alone would earn my gratitude for the rest of my days. I do not refuse you because in the moment, when everything around me was failing, when my own guards froze under the weight of their own training, you did not need permission to be brave. That is rare, Daniel Hollis. rarer than any title, any bloodline, any crown. I did not have a clever response ready. All I managed to say was that I had never expected any of this, that I was simply a man who fixed trucks and pulled people out of trouble when trouble found them. Nothing more. That is precisely why it must be you, Queen Miriam said, almost smiling. A man who does not seek greatness rarely realizes he already carries it. What followed in the months after was a strange blend of two completely different worlds trying to understand one another. I was brought before councils of advisors who studied Earth cultures the way historians study ancient ruins, curious and careful, sometimes amused by our simple customs. I attended formal dinners where the food moved on its own plate until someone showed me the proper way to still it before eating, and where the wrong choice of fork brought quiet laughter from nobles who clearly doubted a farmer belonged anywhere near their court. There were moments I felt completely out of place, standing in rooms filled with people who had studied politics and diplomacy since childhood, while I had spent my life studying engines and weather patterns instead. Some of the nobles made their doubts known, whispering behind polished glasses of golden drink about how their princess deserved someone raised in halls of power, not someone raised in fields of corn. But Vasari never once let those whispers reach me without standing beside me to answer them herself. She would remind them, calmly but firmly, that her own protectors, trained since birth in every art of combat and calculation, had hesitated when it mattered most, while a man with no training at all had acted without a single moment of doubt. She reminded them that leadership was not only built from careful thought, but also from the courage to act when careful thought ran out of time. I began to understand, slowly, why her mother believed so strongly in the match. The Vareth had built an empire on patience and precision, values that had carried them through centuries of peace. But peace, I learned, made people forget how to face sudden danger. Their history was filled with quiet victories in negotiation, but also with a few devastating losses in moments that required immediate action, rather than careful debate. Queen Miriam believed that her daughter's future children needed both gifts, the patience of her mother's line, and the instinct of a man who moved before fear could stop him. There were harder days too, days when I questioned whether I truly belonged in this new life at all. I missed the simple quiet of my farm, the smell of rain on dry soil, the sound of my old truck engine turning over on a cold morning. Vasari noticed this more than anyone, and instead of asking me to abandon that life completely, she asked to see it herself. She walked through my fields in simple clothes, without guards, without translators glowing beside her collar, learning my language slowly on her own, instead of relying only on machines to bridge the gap between us. She asked questions about everything: why farmers planted certain crops in certain seasons, why storms on Earth moved so differently from storms on her world, why I still kept an old crowbar hanging near my door, even after everything that had happened. Because it reminds me, I told her one evening as the sun set behind my barn, that sometimes the simplest tools are the ones that matter most when everything else fails. She smiled at that, a small, genuine smile that had nothing to do with royal duty or political alliance. It was the same calm curiosity she had shown me the night I pulled her from a burning wreck, except now it was softened by something warmer, something that had grown between us slowly, built from countless quiet evenings rather than sudden danger alone. One night, several months before the wedding, a different kind of trouble arrived, one that had nothing to do with wrecked ships or burning fields. A small group of nobles from a rival house, unhappy with Queen Miriam's choice, sent word demanding a formal trial of worth before the marriage could be allowed to continue. They claimed that a man with no training, no title, and no knowledge of interstellar law had no right to stand beside the last heir of the Vareth line, no matter what he had done on one lucky night. Vasari wanted to refuse the challenge outright, but her mother explained that tradition required an answer, not silence. So a trial was arranged, not a fight, not a contest of weapons, but a test of judgment, held inside a chamber where sudden problems were presented, one after another without warning, forcing the person being tested to respond immediately rather than plan ahead. I stood alone in that chamber while advisors and nobles watched from a raised platform above me. The first problem appeared as a projection, a ship losing power above a populated city, with only seconds to choose which system to save first. The Vareth judges expected hesitation, expected me to ask for data, for time, for numbers I did not have. Instead, I answered the way I always had, quickly, based on what mattered most in that instant, protecting the people below before worrying about the ship itself. The tests continued, each one stranger than the last. Some involving machines I had never seen, others involving simple choices, dressed up in complicated language, meant to confuse rather than clarify. I failed to explain some of my answers using their proper legal terms, and more than once the crowd above me murmured with obvious doubt. But each time, when the moment demanded action rather than explanation, I moved without freezing, without waiting for someone else to decide for me. When the trial ended, the head judge, an old advisor with pale blue skin and tired eyes, admitted something I did not expect. She said that in 30 years of testing candidates from noble houses across a dozen worlds, she had rarely seen someone respond so quickly to danger, without any formal training at all. She said most candidates, no matter how well educated, spent valuable seconds trying to appear correct, instead of simply being useful. The rival house withdrew their objections soon after, though not without quiet grumbling that continued for weeks in certain corners of the court. Queen Miriam never mentioned the trial again in public, but she thanked me privately, saying that she had worried more than she let anyone see, and that watching me pass through it had settled something in her heart she had not realized was still uncertain. Vasari, for her part, had watched the entire trial from the platform above, her hands gripped tightly around the railing the whole time. She told me later that she had wanted to step down and stand beside me more than once, tradition or no tradition, and that watching me face each sudden danger alone had been harder for her than facing any danger of her own. It was in that chamber, she admitted quietly one evening afterward, that she stopped seeing me as simply the man who had saved her life, and started seeing me as someone she wanted beside her for the rest of it. The day of our marriage arrived beneath a sky filled with both Earth's sun and the soft glow of her people's ships, hovering respectfully above the fields where I once ran toward a burning wreck. Nobles from a dozen worlds gathered beside farmers and neighbors from my own small town, an unlikely mixture of cultures brought together by a single night that none of us could have predicted. But Queen Miriam stood before the gathered crowd, her voice steady and clear as she addressed both her own people and mine. She spoke of balance, of how a civilization built only on caution could grow brittle over time, and how a single act of courage, unplanned and unmeasured, had reminded her people what true strength looked like. She spoke of her daughter's wisdom, and of my instinct, and how together they represented something neither culture could build alone. When she finally turned to me, her golden eyes, so much like her daughter's, held a warmth I had not expected from the same woman who once studied me with careful suspicion in a burning cornfield. "Only a man like you," she said again, her voice carrying across the crowd, "could stand beside my daughter and complete what our people have long been missing." Vasari took my hand then, her grip steady and sure, the same grip that had once held tightly to my jacket as we ran from a dying ship. She did not need a crown to prove her strength, and I did not need noble blood to prove mine. What we needed, in the end, was simply the courage to move when moving mattered most, and the wisdom to build something lasting once the danger had passed. Life since that day has not been simple. I have learned new languages, new customs, new ways of thinking that once felt impossible to understand. I have made mistakes at formal gatherings that still make certain nobles smile quietly behind their hands. But every evening, when the work of the day is done, Vasari sits beside me, golden eyes calm and steady, never once regretting the mud on my boots, or the simple life I once lived before the sky opened above my fields. Her mother visits often, watching quietly as her daughter and I build a life neither of our worlds could have predicted. She reminds me, sometimes with a small knowing smile, that courage rarely announces itself with fanfare or preparation. It simply appears in the moment it is needed most, carried by ordinary people who never intended to become anything more than what they already were. I never set out to marry a princess, or to stand among the leaders of a civilization far older than my own. I only meant to help someone in danger, because that is what I have always done, without waiting for permission, without calculating the cost, and somehow, that single choice, made in a burning field on an ordinary night, changed the course of my entire life, and perhaps the future of two worlds learning, slowly and carefully, how to move forward together.